welcome to the Acid Trash Jamboree and to a landmark 50th episode. To celebrate, I thought I'd dig out and cover one of my favourite items from the collection, Soul's True Love, a sprawling 4-CD box set featuring some of the earliest recordings by the legendary improvising experimentalist Keiji Haino. Born in 1952 in Chiba, Japan, and influenced initially by both confrontational avant-garde theatre and Western psychedelic groups such as The Doors and Blue Cheer, Haino was active in numerous rock and experimental bands of his own throughout the 70s. Strangely though, save for a compilation appearance by one of the projects we'll be discussing today, Lost Aaraaff, as well as a guest appearance on the debut LP by the artist known as Magical Power Mako, actual recorded evidence of Haino was in extremely short supply until 1981, when he belatedly put out his debut solo LP. That's not to say that nothing much else was actually committed to tape during this early portion of Haino's musical career. Nah, far from it. By all accounts, the fella seems to have quite an archive of vintage concert, studio, and home recordings. These have been drip-fed to us over the decades, mostly by the crucial Japanese label P.S.F. Records, though in the case of this box, Haino self-released it on his Purple Trap imprint, on Christmas Day 1995 no less. And yeah, what a precious gift it turned out to be. Okay, so disc 1, entitled Concert from the Gen Yasai Festival, and credited to the aforementioned Lost Aaraaff, comprises, as you might expect, of live performances by said band, though as we'll get onto, it seems that only one of these two pieces was actually recorded at the Gen Yasai event. Active in the first half of the 70s, and actually beginning life as a quintet from what I can gather, by 1971, Lost Aaraaff were down to a trio lineup, with Haino performing alongside keyboardist Akira Asami and drummer Hiroyuki Takahashi. Haino's main role in the group was as vocalist, and yeah, fittingly, the first piece here, Hell of Screams, starts off with a huge, mic-gobbling screech from the man, as Asami and Takahashi pile in behind him. Now, for those not in the know, the group played a weirdly cack-handed and wonky form of free jazz, with middling, kind of 6 out of 10 chops, married to 11 out of 10 attitude and enthusiasm. Yeah, you know the drill here. Relentlessly ugly, maximum sustain pedal, piano rumbling, drums that sound like they're tumbling down an endless flight of stairs, and with Haino vocalising like the angriest feral beast on earth, hooting and hollering over the top of the din. After this opening spasm of pure aggression, the trio lay off for a while, with Asami wandering down some curiously Don Bradshaw leather-esque atonal avenues for a time, whilst Haino presumably nips off to get some ice cream to cool his overheating throat. As the intensity builds again, Asami kinda pulls the rug from under Takahashi, suddenly dropping out and forcing him to go into an impromptu drum solo. As I said, Lost Aaraaff weren't exactly what you'd call free jazz masters, so the best he can come up with are some stumbly magic bandisms for a few seconds. The festival crowd give him a lukewarm round of applause before his bandmates rejoin the action, with Haino actually strapping on a saxophone at one point for some surprisingly restrained blowing, following an extended, atmospheric creepscape with Haino seemingly mimicking the spaced-out sound of a theremin with his voice. The fellas resume with their jazzy racket. At one point, Takahashi is afforded another solo. Again, it's pretty clumsy, but at least he sounds a bit more prepared for this one. The rest of the piece finds Lost Aaraaff reprising ideas from earlier. The terrifying screams, the spooky, modern classical keyboard explorations, etc., until Takahashi kicks in with some refreshingly straight-ahead prog rock fills. Haino and Asami don't take his bait though, and before long it's back to the unfocused, hazy noodling, until everything finally crumples into a heap after an exhausting 29 minutes. The second piece, The Lost Judgment, since revealed to have been recorded the previous week at a different gig, is another 29-minute epic. Though unlike with Hell of Screams, where the recording quality is fairly decent and upfront, this one sounds more like an audience bootleg. A little muffled and distant though, overall it's still pretty listenable, the occasional bits of crowd chatter just adding to the atmosphere. The instrumentation is also slightly different for this piece, with Asami seemingly alternating between a fuzzy round the edges electric piano and a monstrously overdriven organ. And yeah, he gets straight to business, mashing down the keys on the latter and whipping up a tumultuous sonic storm. Lost Aaraaff now coming over like Soft Machine or The Crazy World of Arthur Brown at their wildest. Haino being Haino though, he easily outfreaks the vocal gymnastics of Mr. Brown here, even as the instrumentalists momentarily calm things down, spending a good few minutes punctuating his screaming fits with desolate high wails, sounding alarmingly like he's channeling the last castrato at times, as he soars above Asami's scattershot, bitches brew-styled E-piano clusters. Before this section drifts too far into meandering boredom, the keys man soon swings back in with further organ menace, as Haino indulges in a bit of snake-charming reed action. As for Takahashi, it seems that he was in much better form during this particular gig. Okay, so he's still no Milford Graves here, but yeah, by the time he takes his first solo, he's executing some pretty impressive moves on the kit. After these tub-thumping heroics, the trio settle into a melancholic, minor-key half song for a while, though this eventually peters out into screams and sparse drum thwacks, the fellas eventually turning up the heat again, bubbling over into some intense, seat-of-the-pants prog-psych thundering, as Haino groans away in agonised ecstasy. Takahashi then takes another solo, though he's audibly knackered by this point and struggles to get anything going. Haino and Asami jump to his rescue with further mic-frying vocal abuse and fractured Joe Zawinullisms on the piano until he gets his breath back, and full props to him, the drummer piles in again and does a much better job. The piece concludes with another foray into almost song territory. Haino again soaring to the top of his vocal range over a bluesy 2-chord vamp. Though once that's over and the crowd applaud politely, he can't resist having the last word. Or the last scream in this case. So that's the Lost Aaraaff disc. In truth, it's always been my least favourite of the 4 here. And yeah, when put under the microscope for this review, its weaknesses became ever more apparent. Still, it's not too bad on the whole, I suppose, with the dodgy, proto-jazz odyssey noodling fits balanced out pretty well by the more inspired sections. So, quite how much you enjoy it depends on how much of a purist you are about this stuff. Indeed, if you're after top-level jazz virtuosity, then you can safely skip over this. But yeah, if you're a Haino fanatic, then you're going to want to hear it at least a couple of times. On to Disc 2. Now, I should point out that all 4 discs have this exact same minimalist front cover design. That said, musically at least, Sweet Reverberation, The Third Heart, is a completely different proposition, presenting us with 12 solo home recordings, apparently laid down circa the late 60s and early 70s. So yeah, through a mysterious fog of tape hiss and other audio anomalies, we get to hear Haino trying his hand at a plethora of different instruments. Though, as we'll get onto, I'm not convinced that all of them are listed on the box's obi strip, making identification pretty difficult in places. Beginning with a skeletal fragment of harmonica puffing, we immediately hit the first of the CD's 3 epics, Blushes of the Holy Beast, which finds him manning the keys of some kind of organ, teasing out little melodic motifs and drones, all the while creating distressed seal noises on a delay effects sax. Yeah, going off a few of the pieces here, it would appear that Haino hadn't fully adopted his no overdub stance at this point. Even so, he was hardly piling on the sonics with this stuff, with things kept uncluttered enough to hear stray creaks, knocks, and dog barks in the background. Dimming the time and scent where once you were also features all manner of reed wanderings, this time on what sounds like a clarinet, whilst he morosely strums a mandolin or ukulele in the background, giving us the Acker Bilk and George Formby on a bum trip fantasy collab we didn't know we needed. The mellow, depressive death trance induced by this piece is rudely interrupted by a short, sharp shock of Haino screeching right at the top of his register, which sounds like a kettle whistle going off right in your ear, before we hit the disc's longest work, Glittered Solitude Fades from Memory. Ostensibly, this is a 12.5-minute violin solo, beginning and ending with your common organ and tortured cat atonality, though midway through, things turn strange, with Haino somehow getting the instrument to emit these unnatural and thoroughly unsettling grumblings. The person who reviewed Soul's True Love for the Arcane Candy website guessed that Haino was applying some kind of vibrating motor device to the strings here, which sounds a pretty valid explanation for the weird noises. The next piece pits further violin abuse, this time even more frenzied and wild, against a fuzzed out, fluctuating drone from a tone generator, after which it's back to the ultra-short fragments, the last of these featuring a pile-up of prepared acoustic guitar twanging, sounding like the sort of thing Fred Frith would knock out a few years later on his first solo LP. As we near the end of the disc, the track When I Visited My Home, the land where a grey sun rises, is 5 minutes of fractured cello experimentation, with Haino alternating between doomy, low-end sawing, high horror movie stings, and altogether more off-piste, free jazz moves. Then the penultimate piece, the 11-minute The Secret Pact Between Beauty Awareness and the Gods of the Underworld, is probably the weirdest thing on offer here. Now, after some close listening, I'm guessing it's another prepared guitar piece, this time on an electric instrument. Yeah, going from tense, skittering sounds and mid-register quiver to flatulent, detuned rubber band disturbance. Again, this appears to predate early solo Frith, as well as the stuff that Merzbau would be filling cassettes with a decade later. Further into the twilight, then concludes things with 2 minutes of low-key, spooky plodding on what may very well be a xylophone. Weirdo that I am, I think it was this disc that I was most excited to hear when I finally laid my hands on the box back in the 2000s. Granted, whilst some of the pieces do precisely nothing of interest, taken on an individual basis, when considered as a suite, they do actually make some strange kind of sense. And yeah, re-listening to the disc all these years later, I ended up firmly engrossed in its intimate atmosphere. For the record, I'll gladly sit through further collections of Haino's home experiments if they ever emerge. Disc 3 is another Haino solo affair, and another suite. Yeah, subtitled Forest of Spirits. This one was originally commissioned for a dance performance in 1973. And this is a hefty one, with just 4 pieces, ranging between 6 and 26 minutes. The first movement, the reverberation that pursues its own growing sparse memories, takes its sweet time to fade in, eventually presenting itself as a dense mass of detuned radio frequencies, with playful, watery flute tones hovering above the murk like multiple will-o'-the-wisps, everything fed through a trippy delay unit for extra disorientating effect. After a good while, the crackling lurches forwards and overpowers the flutes, though it's a short-lived victory, the noise instead crapping out and things eventually just returning to how they were till the conclusion. Movement 2. The reverberation that becomes aware of colours in this world is altogether more sparse, being a spooked-out violin showcase. Whilst he's hardly shredding the thing like Jean-Luc Ponty, he's playing it with a lot more purpose and focus than on the previous disc, again feeding it through his delay effects and overall creating a desolate and morbid vibe, akin to Takahisa Kasugi at his most foreboding. The third one, the reverberation that wishes to blur into water, is a similarly spare and ghostly affair, reprising the anguished horn wailing from Blushes of the Holy Beast, after which we're plunged head first into a bubbling vat of harsh noise nastiness. Yep, you heard that right, harsh noise in 1973. And we're not talking tentative, prototype anything here, or piddling about with a bit of guitar feedback. Nah, Haino goes straight for the jugular, blasting right in and whipping his machines into a fizzing, speaker-frying frenzy for just under 26 minutes. The title of this final movement, the reverberation that attempts to take back all energy into itself, is a fitting one, with only the decayed fidelity preventing Haino's dense electrical storm from sucking the life from its poor, unsuspecting listeners. Okay, whilst it's hardly a dazzling and fast-moving assemblage that's likely to blow modern-day minds with its complexity, the piece instead being quite content to wallow about in its relentlessly churning waves of filth. Credit where credit's due. This predates similar works by the likes of Maurizio Bianchi and the whole Broken Flag axis by almost a decade. Whatever the case, I love crusty, lo-fi tape noise like this, so I'm happy to get my fix from wherever I can. So another good disc on the whole, successfully sustaining a bleak, haunted mood for over 3/4 of an hour before blowing it all apart at the end. Granted, listened to with fresh ears, the first piece in particular does seem a bit one-dimensional, considering its length, though overall, I'm just happy this music survived long enough so that we could hear it at all. But yeah, quite what the dancers made of this stuff back in the day is anyone's guess. The fourth and final disc is untitled and is given over to some very early recordings by Fushitsusha, who have since gone on to become Haino's most known and acclaimed band. But yeah, whilst the precise recording information for these 4 tracks is now seemingly lost to the mists of time, there's speculation that they could all be from as early as 1978, which is the year the band formed. The first one is christened with one of Haino's most ludicrous titles, the decisive battle between futility and the understanding that 1 × 1 =?. And yeah, basically, it's a very raw and primitive improvised piece, lasting just under 14 minutes with a long stretch of cranky guitar feedback, eventually giving way to a skeletal, clean-toned duel with the drummer, who's otherwise mostly kept quiet until now. Whilst he doesn't appear to be playing through any effects other than some nasty distortion pedal or other, Haino achieves a nicely rubbery tone at a few points, which I find pretty enjoyable. A Drop of Nerves Falls is the shortest piece on the disc at a mere 8 minutes, consisting of Haino rattling some bits of percussion about, in between terrifying fits of vocal fry, where he basically sounds like he's being tortured. Yeah, how this man has any voice left after 50-odd years of screaming his tits off, I'll never know. In a room where I am showered with honouring insults, clocks in at just under half an hour. And yeah, it's one of the strangest Fushitsusha pieces that I've ever heard. Opening with a maddening, minimalist chirping, backed by massive spasms of electronic noise. This must all be the sound of Tamio Shiraishi, who was the band's synthesizer player until 1979. Before long, Haino takes to the mic, cooing and moaning, again somewhere between agony and ecstasy, before letting rip with yet more of those medieval torture dungeon screeches. The electronics eventually back off, going altogether more spacey and atmospheric, occasionally rushing forwards again into peaks of washing white noise and gross gurglings, until Haino straps on his axe and all hell breaks loose. Yeah, with the synth nudged out of the way, the guitar firmly takes centre stage, with dissonant string jabs and feedback whine aplenty, climaxing in an almighty stretch of freak-out scrabbling. Out of this, the synth nervously re-emerges, though before we know it, Haino's off again on a 6-string rampage, eventually calming down enough to allow his bandmate to join in, giving us a precious few seconds of the noise duet we've been hoping for all along. Towards the end, out of nowhere, the drummer finally decides to take part, beating the living daylights out of a tom, Mo Tucker style, and whipping Haino into a hair-thrashing frenzy, his brutal one-note riffing conking out into delirious feedback abandon. The very final track here seems to comprise of 4 distinct and mostly very quiet songs. The jangly death blues of All There Is Now, the sweet ballad Being Here, the jangly death jazz of He Lives, and wrapping up with the desperate Everyone the Same, which is a perfect mixture of the previous 3. As with the other pieces here, hell, as with the whole box, there's no bass guitar in evidence during this mini-suite. The only accompaniment coming from the drummer, name unknown unfortunately, who valiantly tries to keep time with Haino's woozy, punch-drunk strumming. Now, if you want to hear even more vintage early doors Fushitsusha, this makes a nice companion piece to the CD entitled It Was Eternity That Reached Out First, as released by the aforementioned P.S.F. records back in 2003, which I'm sure I'll get around to covering properly at some point, along with all the other archival Haino CDs. Okay, so that wraps up my deep dive into Soul's True Love. Whilst I may not still view it as the best thing since sliced bread all these years down the line, as I said earlier, I'm just glad this glut of music, as embryonic and half-formed as some of it is, survived long enough to see a release. For new fans, I definitely recommend starting elsewhere. But yeah, for the dedicated completists out there, this is a fascinating glimpse into one of Haino's lost decades, and is frequently excellent. Now, if we could only get a box set dedicated to his unreleased 80s archive. Right, so that's 50 episodes done and dusted. A big thanks to everyone who's watched and subscribed so far. If this is your first visit to the channel, please take a look around for similar content and hit subscribe to keep fully up to date. Until next time, take care and I'll catch you again soon on the Acid Trash Jamboree.